What's up, guys? It's your boy Shanus, and today I'm extremely excited to bring you the video, my hands-on of the 2021 Sonata N Line behind me. Let's get into it. So real quick, before I get into the ins and outs of the vehicle, I did kind of want to give you guys a side note. Again, this is not a full review, this is a hands-on and kind of opinions from a tuner's perspective. But to be completely transparent with you guys, because of the pricing and just a lot of other factors, this car is kind of in its own level. So the first thing I'll address is the caption. To me, I very well believe that this is an N model without the N badge, and I'm going to go into the reasons, my opinion at least, on why I believe they're probably never going to make an N version of this, and if they do, well, we'll get into that. Alright guys, so first and foremost, let's address the elephant in the room, and that is the styling of the new 2021 Hyundai Sonata. So much like everybody else, I was actually not really into the looks. I thought that it looked and resembled a catfish just like everybody else. However, after seeing the N Line's aesthetics and redesign, I kind of take that back. At least the N Line. There's a lot of different things, but of course the front end sports a different bumper, which is much more aggressive, and I do love the gloss black accents themselves. One of the biggest key takeaways that I like is these vents, and so they're actually functional. Of course, the whole thing isn't open, just the most outer part. So if you actually look at the most stock base Sonata, these ducts are actually split in half, and the front air duct down here isn't as aggressive. So the N Line definitely gets kudos there. Now I'm gonna go walk around just to show you. I love how even on the normal Sonatas, these side ducts exist to ventilate not just the wheels themselves and the tires, but more than likely some of that goes to the rotors and the brakes. So that definitely helps. Now this wheel design, this is quite possibly one of the better Hyundai wheel designs on any of their models that I've seen. These are gorgeous. Of course, it'd be nice from a tuner's perspective if they were flush, but that's me just being nitpicky. N Line on the fender, just to let people know what this is. Much like everybody else probably has the same opinion, I could have done without all the excess chrome. However, I do understand that it ties in to the whole front LED, which I'll go to in a moment. But at the very least, I think they could have avoided having the chrome trim on the door handles. You'll notice that on the side profile, so the side skirts are actually much more aggressive. They actually stick out quite a bit. And then of course, you go towards the rear, independent rear suspension, multi-link rear suspension. Kudos to Hyundai for doing that. Also, if you're wondering, again, I'm in love with these wheels, but you notice how massive that rear rotor is? So the N Line does sport larger rotors and calipers for that added aggressiveness and extra stopping power. Then we just keep on kind of going to the back, and another key difference is the rear lower part of the bumper. One, you get true dual exhaust, so one there, but on the normal Sonata models, the actual back trim over here matches the paint color. On the N Line, you get the full black treatment with the lower diffuser area. The nitpick that I'm gonna have about back here, and I'm actually taking this from my boy Rady's Rides, is that where's the N Line badge? I mean, it's got Sonata all over it, and minus the small little things down here that I mentioned, oh, and the black, gloss black lip spoiler on the trunk, there's really nothing else that differentiates this being the special N Line from the back. So, you know, that's one thing that does annoy me a little bit, because if you buy one of these, I mean, I hate to say it, bragging rights, right? I mean, you don't buy a BMW M Series to not have a rear M badge. Again, me being nitpicky. And while we're back here, the last nitpick that I have is the built-in rear vortex generators on the rear taillights. They're built into the taillight. They're not part of like a spoiler. So I know that that's probably going to cause some issues if you wanted to mount an aftermarket spoiler on this. Honestly, this looks so good that I personally feel that a aftermarket, kind of like a duckbill spoiler, similar to what they offer for the Challengers, would look amazing on this car. Back this way, I'm gonna kind of point towards the roof because while some of you like me might not need this, it does have a panoramic rear sunroof. The positive behind it is that you get a black roof. It's not paint matched to the car because of course it's glass. So that is kind of nice, especially on a color like this white one where the black accents offset. And then finally, the N Line also gets blacked out mirrors for both sides, regardless of what paint you go with. So yeah, this car is stunning. Actually, before we get into the inside, the funny part, because you guys obviously know that I've done tons of reviews and simple installs for people when it comes to bulbs, just to make their cars a little more aesthetically pleasing and technically a little safer at nighttime. The Sonata N Line has full LEDs all around. Every single thing is an LED, from the headlights to the high beams to the turn signals, which are technically switchbacks built into the daytime running lights. And then I mentioned earlier that there's some LEDs that essentially go from this portion right here, and it goes up and basically it fades out up here into the chrome strip, which is again probably why they went with the chrome aesthetics to go all the way back and around the windows. LEDs for the side mirror turn signals, and then the trunk is full LED all the way to the sides. So yeah, but let's get to the inside, show off the things that I like about the interior. Oh yeah, actually, while we're going in, you can't see this because it's only at night times, but there's an LED in the door handle to illuminate where your hand's meant to go. Again, little touch of details. It's a little more, how would I say, a little more luxury-ish. All right, so before we go in and close the door, the first thing that you'll notice is the Bose sound system. Now, if you thought I was raving about the Dimension sound system and the Veloster, this is just a whole nother level. And again, keep in mind that even though this is a Sonata N Line, this is actually very much a borderline luxury car because this is the second most expensive trim that you can get of a Sonata, just short of the Ultimate. So while it does sacrifice some of the features that the Ultimate has and luxury perks, this is really close to that. And you can tell because, for example, for aesthetics, again, they went with a darker chrome all the way on the inside. And then you do have leather handrest and this beautiful, gorgeous red stitching, which I do believe is exclusive to the Sonata. Now closing the door. Now that we've closed the door, we're going to focus a bit on the steering wheel. And this is this is the first nitpicky part. And I wish, because this is an N Line, I wish they would have gone with a sportier design. This is technically the design that all of the Sonatas get, regardless of trim. There's nothing wrong with it. And they did definitely do things to differentiate this from the normal model. So it is all leather and it feels amazing. Then you have this kind of like simulated venting right here, and then just solid leather here. And then of course the continued darker chrome accents all the way to the bottom where you have the red stitching continued, and of course the N emblem on the steering wheel. But I would have much preferred if they would have done kind of like a D-cut, which the Elantra Sport models of old had, or even the more aggressive V design that's on the Elantra the Elantra N Line and the Velosters. Again, it's just me being nitpicky, but at least you do get something to show off what it is. And speaking of which, you probably noticed there's paddle shifters. So a simple tap puts this car into its manual configuration. I state that because, again, remember I mentioned this is very borderline luxury. And if you go over here, you'll see what I mean. There is no traditional shifter, much like the cousin, the K5. This one gets a fancier button system, very similar to Acura's systems and many other luxury car makers. And then the little N badge right here, again, just for aesthetics, letting you know that you're an N Line model. And then very aesthetically pleasing is this drive mode. This is actually perfect positioning as opposed to the huge button that's on the left top for the Elantra N Line. And basically I'll go into that a little bit later, but you use that to, again, go into a manual mode. Let's say you want to go back into like an automatic mode. You just simply go back down here, tap the D, and then you don't have to do the shifts yourself. So again, just really nice things. But another thing to address is you're probably wondering, hey Shayness, where's the gauges? I don't see anything. Well, again, in the sense of luxury, so gone are analog gauges, replaced by a complete gorgeous digital display that displays digital gauges. And another cool thing that's exclusive to the N Line model is there's a page in here where it shows you gauges. And I think this is actually really handy because even though I highly doubt many people are going to track their Sonata N Lines, as you can see, the top gauge is engine oil temperature, which is definitely handy for people that do extremely spirited driving or track driving. Then the lower left, you have a torque meter. And then on the bottom right, you have your boost gauge for the turbo. Another thing you're probably stating is, hey Shane, I mean, this is an N Line. Like, I see the gauges. I mean, what's up with that? They're white. They look a little too classy. I hear you. So remember that drive mode I mentioned? This car has 4 drive modes: normal, sport, sport plus, and custom. Beautifully, if you go into sport mode, which you guys have probably already seen this trick, but the gauges turn completely into a more aggressive set. Unfortunately, the middle gauges, they stay kind of with the same theme and color that they have, but at least your speedometer and tachometer changes from the white classy with blue to carbon fiber, black, and red trims. And as you can see, there's kind of like this little burning light that's going from the 0 to 1 on the tachometer. Same with the engine coolant temperature and the fuel gauge. So that actually, much like the standard gauges, illuminates with how far up it goes. So here, I'll rev it a little bit. See? That splash of color just goes up with it. Really nice. If you go into Sport Plus, it automatically disables traction control, as you can see at the bottom. Traction control disabled. Custom, again, these are some things I just can't play with, but it goes back to these gauges. I don't know if there's a custom where you could choose it to go to the sport mode gauges. Again, not sure, but I will demonstrate in custom that the blue does the same thing. So we'll rev it again and you'll see that the blue kind of paints up and then back down. So yeah, really cool. I love these gauges, and unfortunately, so the Korean spec Elantra N Line got these gauges as well. In US and Canada, we did not. We got those analogs from the base Elantra. However, I'm being told, and I've seen, that these are the exact same gauges that you will get if you go for the new Elantra N model, which will come out later this year. I guess I should also mention that this gauge cluster is shared with a few other models in the Hyundai lineup, and they do kind of have different gauge designs, particularly the hybrid models. And I do believe that the new Tucson 2022 model has this style. But the one thing that I am going to note, and the reason why I'm bringing up the Tucson, is that in this car it looks classy, because as you can see, you have the outer cover like a traditional gauge cluster. If you haven't seen the Tucson is quite literally just a screen. It looks like a tablet. There's nothing above it, no cowl, so to speak. It looks cheap. And for what you're paying, I feel like they should have kind of stuck to this classy look. Again, that's just my opinion. I love that they did that for the Sonata N Line at the very least, because it just looks more traditional. But if you want to be super nitpicky about luxuries, so as you can see, digital AC, love the fact that your actual temperature gauges are built into the knobs. I'm turning it off so hopefully it doesn't pick up the wind noise. But as you can see, because it's gloss black, everything is gloss black. This is a negative in the sense that it is just a fingerprint and dust magnet. So I would probably keep a microfiber cloth handy, because you're gonna see a lot of, fingerprints and whatnot. And that leads me to the gorgeous 10.25 inch display that's built in. So as you can see, it's got this little split function, which is kind of cool. I haven't played with it, but I'm actually being told that as of now, you can't consume the full screen, or maybe it's you can't consume the full screen if you use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. It's stuck on the split. So you'll have like CarPlay taking this screen, and then this, you can have weather, your AC controls, a clock, and a few other things. Oh, the map if you have, So yeah, there's that. But again, for the price of this, there's one thing that I should mention. So if you remember the Elantra N Line hands-on I did, that comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. This does not. This has to be plug and play in order to get either of those functions. I am being told by the dealerships that this has the capability of being able to do that, but it might have to come in a firmware update, and we'll see if Hyundai decides to enable that feature for these. I'm not too upset because I have heard some reportings that the wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto on the Elantra N Line has been spotty and finicky for some. So I don't mind. I also personally prefer that because hardwired, the audio comes out better. You can test it yourself if you don't believe me. Lastly, just functionality. So you have two USBs, one's for data and of course like the Apple CarPlay Android Auto, one's for charging, a 12 volt outlet, and then the Qi charger, which is actually this right here. Neat thing, it's actually ventilated too. So for those of you that don't like wireless chargers because it heats up the phone too much, there's that. You have the same pedals that you've had forever, all the way to the Veloster first gen. And then push button start, just kind of typical fare, nothing too fancy. Dark chrome around the vents, and then again, more red stitching all around. It's daytime. I'm gonna say one last thing that I love about this that I don't know why, but like nobody that reviews this car mentions this. There's actually accent lighting underneath here, and you could change and choose the color of it from like 60,000 or whatnot. It actually continues to the doors right underneath the black chrome on both sides. So even here, and then also right here. So it's super neat. Here, I'll actually show you real quick in the menu. So you could literally choose the color. So right now, I guess it's set on purple. And it changes the color. So let's just change it to red, just for the sake of it. You're not gonna see it, but it denotes that, hey, you're now in red. So you'll be able to have whatever it is that you want on this particular car. So that's really neat. I have seen it, I have seen it. It's not as bright as I'd like it to be, but it's really a cool bonus nonetheless. All right, before we go to home base, just the last little luxuries that I wanted to show you is that panoramic sunroof, which is beautiful. And then for those of you wondering if there's more N accents, you have a Sonata N Line floor mats, just like the Elantra N Line and the Veloster R specs back in the day. And forget my camera bag, but the seats themselves have the N logo embedded in the center, with the red stitching continued all the way to the top. So there's that. But let's go back to home base. I got to return this car and just kind of go over how beast of a car this is. Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Shayness back at home base. Sorry for the abruptness in the transition, but I realized I mentioned some things at the beginning, and this video's actually kind of gone on for a little bit longer than I expected. So I'm actually just going to touch base on a lot of the driving dynamics and just the nitty gritty of the performance side of things. And then as far as actually comparisons and the whole N lineup, there's a lot of things that have been brewing, things that I just found out through, you know, my own ways, my connections. So I'm probably going to make a separate video about that for those of you interested. But back to the Sonata N Line. This car is actually really amazing. And if you've seen any reviews on it, you know, for me, I was in disbelief when I first saw the car. To be completely blunt with you, I actually wasn't interested in test driving it or really doing much of a hands-on with this car because at the end of the day, for some reason, I kind of associated it similar to like the Dodge Charger Challenger in the sense that it was a big car, it was heavy, and it was very much going to be a boat. And that is until I test drove it. And I could honestly vouch for this. I went out with the missus. She actually rode passenger with me. We were test driving the car. And, you know, I was admiring the amenities because, again, like I notated quite a bit in the videos, it is very much luxurious inside as opposed to other options in the same segment. Again, it's not quite a Genesis, but for the price, you're getting a lot of luxury. Going back to the driving dynamics, I decided to put it into sport mode. Again, I was expecting nothing at all, and I even told the missus, hey, I'm putting it into sport mode, I'm gonna get on it. And we're like, all right, cool, let's go. Barely tapped the throttle, and the car just flew. I am not making this up when I'm saying that I got thrown back into the seat, and it was just honestly kind of a violent takeoff because I was kind of already at speed and I was just messing around and I was expecting it to have a nice, you know, nice throttle response, but I wasn't expecting the change in dynamic. And that brings me to the point that these drive modes, Hyundai has done an amazing job of tuning things. So much so that even though I have not driven the Veloster and dual clutch, I can honestly, with confidence, tell you that that car probably drives better than the manual version. And I know I'm all for stick shift over the DCTs, but it's getting to a point where technology, even within Hyundai's own camp, is just getting so fine-tuned. So again, the drive mode from the normal to the sport is a night and day difference. While the shifting is snappy and nice, you do kind of get an eco mode. You do have power in the normal mode, but it is not as instant and not as aggressive as it is in sport mode. There's very little lag, which is quite surprising because the turbo in this is actually quite large looking. Again, this is the 2.5 liter engine with a turbo producing 290 horsepower and a ridiculous amount of torque. It's just such an experience. And again, with that multi-link suspension system, the car is so firm and planted. I am told that for the N Line, the suspension is stiffer, tighter, and just a little bit lower, and it shows in the driving experience. I 100% believe that they did a phenomenal job. Now moving on to that beautiful dual clutch transmission. So this vehicle, much like in the new Veloster N dual clutch version and in the future Elantra N and Kona N, sports the Hyundai's all new in-house built 8-speed wet dual clutch transmission. And for those of you who have driven any of Hyundai's dual clutches, even all the way up to the most recent 7-speed versions, so if you guys saw my N Line Elantra review, I was actually really happy with the changes that they made to the 7-speed. It felt definitely a lot better and quite an improvement over the first generation dual clutch. But this new 8-speed wet dual clutch is a night and day difference. It is absolutely phenomenal. These shifts are so quick. You don't believe that it's a Hyundai product because you've never seen something this robust and this high quality in this segment by this manufacturer. It's just mind-blowing how well crafted this thing is, and the gear ratioing, the tuning behind it. Unfortunately, because the Sonata is a front-wheel drive and with all that power, it does struggle to put it down. They did not incorporate the limited slip differential that's included in the Veloster N and the soon-to-be Elantra N, and it is a shame that they weren't able to do that, but I do understand that there had to be some corners cut in order to bring the Sonata to the price range that it's at. Now, to address the elephant in the room of mentioning this being the N without the N badge, the reason why I state that is because N Line, with the exception of the Elantra and the future Veloster N Line, which we will mention in another video, those are the few models that actually have changes that are performance based with the badge. For the other vehicles like the Tucson N Line and the Kona N Line, essentially what I'm being told is that they're just styling packages. So for those vehicles, they're going to look a little more aggressive and a little sportier, but there's nothing really there to change it. The Elantra, again, being its own unique one, and technically the Veloster, because the Veloster's always had two platforms. You had your base, the naturally aspirated model, and then you had your turbo models, which all had the 1.6, and then depending on the trim level, you had certain creature comforts and luxuries. The Elantra is a little different because the Elantra did have the base model, and then of course the Elantra N Line is the one that comes with the 1.6 liter turbo Gamma engine, and of course independent rear suspension as opposed to all the other Elantra lines. So again, that one was a little redefined. The Sonata is special because this actually is the only model that gets a whole different engine, whole different type of suspension tuning, and the engine just produces a ton more power than anything else offered in the Sonata. This is why I state that this truly feels like an N model without the N badge. The reason why it's not an N badged model, and that's just the simple explanation, is that the N is meant to be a completely sport focused vehicle that you can throw around on the track. And as amazing as the Sonata N Line is, I do hate to admit that this is probably not a vehicle, at least in its current shape, that you would be able to easily track the car and daily drive and back and forth. It is not like the Veloster N. It is definitely not going to be like the Elantra N. And for that reason, that's why they limit it to an N Line. Now, this is up for debate. I've talked to many people about this. Me personally, just because of the MSRP of the Sonata N Line is anywhere between $33,000 to $35,000, depending on the paint and accessories. I personally don't believe that they'll come out with a fully fledged N Sonata, and the only reason being is because the cost of it would be quite high, and at that point you're no longer competing with anyone but yourself. But for the price, you would be competing with other models such as the up to come Nissan 400Z, which is going to be starting at $35,000, and the lower trimmed smaller engine Toyota Supra that just got offered earlier last year. Again, it would be really hard for this type of car to compete against that. And also at that point they'd be competing with luxury cars from Audi and BMW, which would probably give the car a run for its money at the same price. So it would be really hard for people to justify paying that higher price tag for a Hyundai just because it has an LSD and maybe, for example, all-wheel drive. Because clearly those are the last steps that would truly transform this car, is giving it at least the limited slip differential to be able to put the power down more efficiently, and of course an all-wheel drive system similar to the one found in the sister car by Kia, the K5, which does have an all-wheel drive system, but again, they unfortunately only offer it on the smaller engine trim, not their GT trim, which is essentially the Sonata N Line. Sorry that I couldn't get into a lot of the other comparisons that I wanted to make. I will go ahead and make a separate video kind of discussing the N trims that are to come out all this year. Like I said, it's no time better than now for KTM owners and sport enthusiasts, because Hyundai has a plethora of investment going into the N badge, with at least N-Line models, which will be affordable for a lot of people. And then for those of you that have a little more to spend, you can of course go for the full-fledged N models or higher N-Lines like the Sonata in this case. But guys, tell me what you think of this car. How do you feel? How do you feel about the price tag? Because again, I know this is pretty high up there. Realistically, the Sonata N Line is priced basically at what the N models are priced at. But of course, it's a little more grown up. It's a little larger. You can definitely use it as a family car, and it's got the driving ability. Maybe not on par, of course, but it's a fun car. It's hard to argue when you got those extra luxuries incorporated. Let me know what you guys think. And let me know if you guys want me to address anything in the next video. Like I mentioned, I am going to go over the future N-Line models, the N models, and then of course competition, because when you're looking at the Sonata, you have the Accord, you have the K5. I'm going to go ahead and make another video differentiating the Sonata and the K5 hand in hand, which one makes more sense for the consumer, depending on the things that you want, interior, exterior. And then of course we'll also throw in a few curveballs like the upcoming 400Z by Nissan. But guys, as always, please be safe out there. Thank you for all the love and support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Gotta get some luck up in here.